Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well on this fine Netroots Friday. Thank you all for joining as folks trickle in. My name is Rach. My pronouns are she and they. I am the Deputy State and Local Outreach Director with Act Blue. For those of you who are unfamiliar, which hopefully you know by this point, but Act Blue is a nonprofit that provides a digital fundraising platform for Democratic candidates, committees, and other nonprofits. We are very, very proud to have a space for small dollar donors to increase their digital fundraising efforts through grassroots efforts. This panel today is the Grassroots Organizing in 2020. A new era begins. Small dollar donors have proved that grassroots fundraising is organizing, and this movement is here to stay. In the midst of a momentous election cycle, small dollar donors are making history, fueling campaigns and organizations at every level by already contributing more than $2 billion to the candidates and causes that they care about. Hear from digital organizing practitioners and movement makers about how digital organizing is driving the progressive movement at an unprecedented level and creating lasting changes to how we organize. We'll reflect on our successes as a movement and share some case studies demonstrating why small dollar donors are more essential than ever to building a people-powered movement. Good morning, and I hope you're ready for this amazing panel. I have with me today some heavy hitters from the DNC, Mobilize, and the Fair Fight PAC. I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Maybe Patrick, would you like to start?
Sure. I don't know if I can turn my video on. But I can just go ahead. There we go. Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Stevenson. My pronouns are he and him. I am the Chief Mobilization Officer at the Democratic National Committee. It's nice to be chatting with you all today.
Hey, I'm sorry I'm late about this. I had some technical difficulty.
No worries, Jamal. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Jamal Bickley King. I am not Quentin James. Quentin, unfortunately, could not make it. I am the Voter Engagement Director for the Collective PAC, and I've been doing a lot of their voter engagement work and helping them mobilize for this election cycle.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Strauss. I'm with Mobilize. My pronouns are she, her. I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and I'm representing Mobilize.
Hi, my name is Hillary. I'm the organizing director at Fair Fight Action, pronoun she, her, and excited to be here today.
Great, thanks so much, y'all. Let's go ahead and kick it off with our first question, and Jocelyn, I'll be coming to you for this, let's start with the first one. How has digital fundraising and engaging with small dollar donors functioned as a form of organizing more broadly for your organization?
So at Mobilize, we have a donation integration that allows organizers to set up make a donation ask. So this can be configured for small dollar donations or just a simple redirect. But we see folks using this really strategically. It can be done event by event. And what we see across the board over the whole platform is that folks who are made, this ask is made to them, roughly 20% of signups actually do initiate that donation, which then we also see the average donation is about $26. So that's 20% of the folks signing up being asked that are donating that average of $26. And we also see through the data that folks who actually make that donation are way more likely to show up. So not only are you getting that small dollar donation, growing your donation base, but you're also able to kind of reduce that flake rate and make sure people are really committed to it.
Thank you for that. Hillary, would you like to hop in on that one?
Yeah, so we actually use Mobilize, and when we started using Mobilize, we actually saw a massive decrease in our flake rate. So it's a wonderful tool to use. But I want to echo everything that Jocelyn said. Small dollar donations not only increases your base, but it also just keeps people engaged, especially in a moment where we are going to have to do massive voter education in all 50 states, specifically around vote by mail and early voting. As we see attacks on the USPS continuing to increase every day. And so focusing on small dollar donors really just helps get, like I said, get people engaged and tuned in, and then to volunteer throughout the entire cycle to feel like they are a part of the movement, because without them, this work just simply can't happen.
Definitely a good point. Thank you. Patrick or Jamal, would either of you like to jump in on that as well?
Sure. I mean, I can start. We've been doing a lot of modeling and working with the Biden campaign on like how we're going to stand up the really full-fledged digital organizing program for GOTV in the last few weeks of this election. And as part of that work, we have been doing some modeling for propensity to donate and modeling for propensity to volunteer, and just in terms of thinking how we're going to reactivate supporters, or like what portions of our email and SMS list we should really be targeting and digging into. And it is striking to me how similar the propensity to volunteer and the propensity to donate model are. It's basically returning the same people, which is just like, we just increasingly have so much data that small dollar donors and people that are going to take like meaningful volunteer actions, like more or less are the same people this time around in this election, which I think is encouraging.
For us, we were doing a lot of the donor pieces were coming in very well. We're steadily starting to move into our actual volunteer piece. We're still getting our legs under us to kind of get that out there, because we have a champagne problem of like volume. A lot of people are coming in, they want to do stuff, they want to help, and that's great. We saw a particular bump because we're a African-American facing organization. During the whole George Floyd episode, there was this massive spike in people who wanted to engage and wanted to donate. And I think that was something that it wasn't just us, but anybody who was like, if you were an African-American or a Black adjacent or African-American adjacent organization, you saw a significant increase in all your engagement, conversions, your resourcing, your money, and stuff like that. And for a lot of us that, and in communication with them, some of them were not prepared, which was like, I think, the only downside is that if there was any lack of capture, because they just weren't prepared for this huge increase in volume due to that moment. But I think all of them have rallied since then, and they now have that capacity to not only hold that work, but have now reached another level in their organizing and engagement as a result. So I think that is, I guess, if there is a silver line for this really dark moment that we had recently, I think it is that a lot of African-American organizations have basically greatly increased their capacity, have forged new bonds and partnerships as a result to help get them to be able to mobilize the way we want them to.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Definitely something that we talk about a lot at Act Blue is that small dollar donors, as you all kind of touched on, love to help in other ways besides just giving money. So this new surge we're seeing is definitely not lost on any of us. Jocelyn, for this next question, similar to the first one, but how have you seen digital fundraising fit into your organizing work with campaign volunteers?
Yeah, I mean, so we service a lot of folks just beyond campaigns. There's a lot of advocacy organizations, so kind of across the board. We've done a lot of work on building out the virtual event features that we already had to make it a lot more frictionless, and we are continuing to build upon that with Zoom integrations and virtual actions. But on top of all of that, you can be plugging in these donation asks, so you're consistently able to basically build that base, as well as making anything from a low bar ask. We've seen folks, I think the thing that's been most surprising is what hasn't changed. People are still really, really interested and involved in their communities, getting their friends to come take action, whether it's, there's all sorts of amazing events that folks are having, from like trivia and happy hour nights. There was a live stream puppy party, all sorts of amazing things, but also really important work like supporting food banks, senior check-ins, directing voters to vote by mail. So all of these sort of high bar and low bar asks can be sort of hosted on your Mobilize page. And then on top of that, being able to make that donation ask, you're able to not only pull in new volunteers, you're also able to pull in new donors and give folks the opportunity to consistently take action, whether it's attending a virtual puppy party or making a small dollar donation. Folks are being able to consistently build a community, even though it is just a virtual space, but still feel like they're taking action, they're doing something important. And we've seen overarchingly, like, people still want to volunteer and they still want to donate and they still want to take action.
Thanks, Jocelyn. And please invite me to the next puppy party. I just got a dog myself, so very interested in that.
I'll keep my eye out. I love the thing. I think that came from DNC, actually, some of your folks, so.
Good to know. Cool. Jamal, this one's for you. How have you shifted your digital organizing strategy this summer as a result of the massive Black Lives Matter organizing movement? And then second part to that, how can small dollar donors and other candidates support Black candidates right now?
Okay, the good news is that we were already middle of doing the shift because of the pandemic. It was like everybody had these designs early in the year, like we're going to do this massive field thing. We're going to go knock all these doors. I've heard there was going to be like this whole GPS enabled tablet thing that we were going to do. It was like hundreds of $1 million. And then the pandemic hit, and basically that $100 million program turned into a $100 million mushroom cloud that exploded over DC. And then we all had to kind of find a way to pivot in a very short order. And to the credit of the progressive movement, we all went ahead and straight up was like, okay, yeah, we can fix this. And we all had this massive pivot to digital organizing, digital engagement, and digital fundraising. There was always going to be that component, but it was going to be, you know, either in combination or in supplement to another program. But now it's not only was the main thrust of the program, in many places it was the only program. And so that was where it was basically this, that exposed a lot of issues that we have in our digital data and our targeting in terms of African-American segments and people of color segments online. Usually nobody really cared about that because we could always make it up on the doors because that's where the segments were stronger. We knew where those communities were. We can engage them. And we oftentimes use that information, data, and program to inform our digital targeting. And now once that was taken away, we were at the mercy of whatever was the best data available for engaging African-Americans and people of color online. So what we did is that, you know, we had to get creative. We had to be scrappy. We ended up trying to merge what was the long tail conversation always about relational organizing and merge it with the digital conversation, which basically relational organizing to us was taking those institutions that are just 100% Black or significantly Black, like Black churches, HBCUs, Black fraternities and sororities, and leveraging their existing community structure, and then kind of like we either pulling them into our digital communication streams or us giving them the digital tools so they can organize themselves within that community so that we can go ahead and grab and take that institutional critical mass of African Americans and turn them into voters, donors, and supporters for our programs. That has been actually very useful, and we're actually about to launch. We had such great early results with that. We developed these larger programs that we're about to launch literally this week, which are our HBCU program, which is going to be huge, and like all these HBCUs can get in a competition to register voters and build campaign plans to engage their universities and their alumni chapters. And then there's also going to be the Black Church 75 program, which we're going to be launching with the National Action Network, where churches can just send us their church list. We match it back to them and say, hey, this is what you're going to be doing. This is here are the unregistered people in your church. You go and register them, and then we provide them with like a toolkit that allows them to register them to vote. This is to kind of try and mitigate what we've seen, this incredibly downward, the low trend. Well, I'm saying it incorrectly. The disproportionately low amount of registrations that we're seeing overall and with the African American community specifically, which I think is like an overall trend with everybody, but it was always acute in our community. And we always were people who registered at a much lower rate online and also did mail at a lower rate online. So we're trying to go ahead and figure out a way to mitigate that. And our theory of the case is that once we figure out better ways to register people online, or people of color and African American specifically, that'll directly help us, give us a roadmap to figure out what is the vote by mail, absentee ballot, and absentee ballot mail chase conversation with those same demographics, because they mirror in their in the disproportionate low level of engagement based on race. I don't know if I answered the whole question. There was a second part to that, and I want to get to that. Oh, what was the other part?
Oh, yes. The second part to that question was just in general, how can small dollar donors and other candidates support Black candidates right now?
Oh, yes, you can give to Collective PAC. We will take all of your money. No, but for real, yeah, Collective PAC has been doing a lot with raising money. We've actually been doing very well. We've been resourcing a lot of work. We were in Louisville during the primary, just doing general African-American GOTV. We were helping out in Missouri doing general GTV well for the primary, trying to just mobilize as many Black people as possible before they had like a lot of really good things on the ballot. And in support of Black candidates, and specifically for a lot of their primaries, we're the ones that give them that seed money. When for a lot of Black candidates, their barrier of entry is so high, is because they just don't have that network to provide them what they call the friends and family round of like, $100,000 or $300,000 for a congressional, or like a simple maybe $10,000 or $30,000 for like maybe a state legislative race or a municipal race, which is like, for many Black people is like, to tell them like, oh, just raise like $30,000 from your friends, you might as well give them a bicycle and tell them to ride it to the moon. It's just not going to happen. So Collective PAC heroically and ambitiously stepped into that, try to bridge that gap early on in 2016. And they have now seen incredible amount now with their resources. And because of their past successes, we now are able to actually resource that early round for African-American candidates to make sure they can make a fight of it and get their issues, raise their profile the way they need to with like a lot of early candidates. And we've seen the results with just a wave after wave of all these brilliant Black candidates that are now lieutenant governors and state legislators and municipal people, attorney generals, especially when you talk and county prosecutors, especially in the whole which connects to the whole George Floyd piece, like that was where county prosecutors have so much say on who gets prosecuted and how and what gets engaged there. So giving to us, we would really appreciate it. We love you all. But that's kind of the crux of our work. And a lot of it does help Black candidates and support Black issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamal. And for those just now coming into the chat, please go to collectivepac.org if you want to learn more about this amazing organization. Patrick, I'll be coming to you for this next question. Over the past 4 years, the DNC has made changes to the way you incorporate small dollar donors into your digital organizing by shifting to a more holistic digital program. What changes have led to the most success for you, and how has your small dollar donor base helped you adjust to the transition to digital during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it won't shock many of you to learn that the Democratic National Committee is not historically the most, how should we say, adaptive organization, might be a nice euphemism for it, right? So I've actually worked at the DNC twice. I worked there during the 2014 midterm cycle, right after President Obama's reelection, and came back in very late 2017. And my job then was overseeing the grassroots fundraising program at the DNC, and we made the somewhat progressive step of integrating our direct marketing program with our online fundraising program. The DNC historically, again, not that adaptive. Probably, I would say we have the most robust direct mail fundraising program in politics. I mean, I haven't verified that, but a lot of our donors are just like, I think of like my grandmother who donated, she just wrote her $25 check every year to the DNC in January, mailed it, did that whole thing. Probably like 2/3 of our grassroots fundraising was happening offline with no online component whatsoever. And it's hard to take someone, we talk about like offline to online organizing and online to offline organizing. It's kind of hard to have a fundraising to organizing experience if there is no online fundraising component to it ever. Like if there is no like upsell, or there is no like really collecting data on people. And when you're offline with someone, you are generally only having a financial relationship with them, right? Like we never went back to my grandmother and said, hey, now here's what you can make some calls, or like you can join a text bank in your community. So a lot of what we've been doing over the past 4 years has been to try to modernize our fundraising approach. Just for example, in 2017, the DNC was spending more money on telemarketing fundraising acquisition than we were on online fundraising acquisition, which is like a flag. That's a flag. Telemarketing acquisition just doesn't work at all. Like it's not in any way, shape, or form ROI positive. There's no payback window on it. So we essentially just, by taking some very simple steps like turning off our telemarketing acquisition and investing in online acquisition, we like really have built a much more robust online fundraising program over the past few years, which necessarily feeds itself into an organizing program, much more so than like our previous fundraising structure did. They also do, I don't want anyone to think my point here is like direct marketing is dead or anything like that. Mail, obviously, and it's a good time to be talking about mail. Mail is probably more relevant than ever. The way we think a lot about mail on our end, though, is it's a complementary item. You know, it's like a multi-channel touch for if someone is giving online and they get a like mail piece from you. It just like we have data that shows that just simply the act of like receiving mail from us increases your propensity to donate online. And we also have some pretty fun data that shows that like texting people that have gotten mail pieces. So, you know, we're able to match like a certain amount of our direct mail recipient universe to functional active cell phones. And we'll just go through and we'll just text and remind everyone that has gotten a mail piece from us, hey, check your mail. You know, Barack Obama wrote you a letter. We found that doing that increases fundraising conversions by like 28%, which is like, certainly that's not a thing that we were doing before. So I guess my top line takeaway to this question is the more silos you have in how you run your grassroots outreach program, like the less effective of a grassroots outreach program you will run. And necessarily it won't translate to the organizing element of things. So right now too, I should also say one more thing. We historically, and I'm sure this is true for many organizations, probably most people's organization on this call, I kind of file our work into, we need to either be raising money or we need to be working to get votes in some way, shape, or form. And historically speaking, we don't think of people on the DNC email list as geotv targets, right? It is mostly people that are like, when we match it to the voter files, it's people that vote in every midterm election. It's people that like, it's much more of a volunteer prospecting audience. I think the biggest thing that has shifted for us this year with the way the election's going and just frankly the complexity of voting in this election is we have started to have to think about our donor prospect audience and our donor base as like people we are also talking to and make sure that they know how to vote. Because even if you're entirely persuaded to vote for Democrats, even if you're entirely persuaded to volunteer for Democrats and donate to Democrats, you still might not be able to figure out how to cast a ballot in November. And that's like, that is a new thing for us. We did not think about that in 2018 or 2016. This is really the first time we've ever had to think about how do we do GOTV to our, our own donor base. And I think in some key states that could be really critical.
Yeah, and we're actually seeing that as well. I'm sorry to cut across. We're seeing that as well in a lot of our research and like some of our engagement with some of our universes. We're like, we do these small kind of like talks on Twitch, which is like very youth-based and youth engagement pieces. And the depth of lack of knowledge on just the mechanics of vote by mail is astounding. And we're taking for granted that just the people who want to cast a ballot or in support of our issues have the ability and understanding to do that at the mechanical level of like postage, sending it in, where to send in the ballot, how to fill it out correctly is known, is absolutely not. We are going to have to slow walk all of our people through a series of educational messaging pieces. And he has people who are basically tied to his communication stream. I don't even want to think about people who are not, who will likely be engaging us and don't know how to do that. So if there's anybody on here who has any funding available, which I know is probably impossible, but they need to understand that they're going to have to either find new money or we're going to have to cannibalize a portion of our budgets just on the educational aspect of voting by mail. And that's on top of any type of quality assurance, any type of absentee ballot request form program, a chase program for that, a mail-in ballot form program, a mail-in ballot chase program in that, and also a verification of did those people actually get their form in, because I can say right now, like through no fault of a lot of these registrars, the confidence in that mechanism is getting lower for reasons we all know. So we have to figure out ways in which we're going to kind of like bridge that gap and build that level of engagement there to make sure that happens. And I'm going to have to go because I'm getting rained on. I'm going to mute and go inside.
Cool, thanks, Jama. And a great point to that about the educating piece of voting by mail. That is a new thing for a lot of registered Americans today. So I hope that we're all investing in that educational piece as well. Hillary, I'll come to you for this next question. Fair Fight was founded in the wake of Stacey Abrams' campaign for governor in Georgia, and includes a number of Abrams campaign staff. You've had to adapt digital fundraising best practices twice. First, applying the lessons from the Abrams campaign to a nationwide campaign fighting against voter suppression. And then second, adapting that strategy for our current digital reality. What tactics or tools have remained constants?
So Fair Fight is in a very interesting place because so I also worked on the Stacey Abrams for Governor campaign. So the transition was almost seamless. And one thing that we were able to do, we in-kinded our full list from the Abrams campaign to Fair Fight. So we still had access to our full volunteer list, donor list, etc. And one of the biggest pieces, and it's kind of like Stacey and our philosophy, is we had to keep people engaged because the momentum that we had seen in Georgia was historical, based on kind of flipping and implementing a brand new strategy that had never been tried in the state of Georgia before. And so immediately what we did was just re-engaged our list and say, because after the campaign ended, in the first legislative session, Brian Kemp, our governor, decided to ban abortion. And I think what happened is it really clicked for everyone that if you don't have the right to vote, all the issues are under attack. And that does not represent the electorate. And so we engaged folks, asked them to donate to Fair Fight to fix elections. So then progressive values are not under attack because of stolen elections. And I think and one of the tactics that we use, Georgia is a very complex state where you have a ton of voters of color everywhere throughout the state. I know a lot of folks like to think of rural areas as white, and that is a lie, and it is a racist assumption, to be frank. And so one thing that we do is we have to think about targeting donors and volunteers in the metro area digitally, but then we have to have a direct contact with those in rural Georgia. And this applies to rural America in general, because there is a severe lack of broadband access in our rural areas. So people cannot get on the internet because they do not have access to it. And so I appreciated what Patrick was saying about direct mail. We do a lot of direct mail with folks. We would do a lot of texting directly to people, specifically in the rural areas, to engage with them and talk with them. Because a lot of times everything that we pump out on the internet is just simply not seen by millions of people, which will then, you are leaving out folks, and they also feel like they're not being heard or seen. And so that has always been a remaining constant at Fair Fight, is making sure that we are talking to everyone. directly through texting. So we use through text. I am a huge fan of sending text out to folks. I do it all the time for various reasons. We will do it when we do a big fundraising drive as well. And the return on investment is always just astounding because we're reaching people in rural Georgia. And because of that, we also do get an influx of checks in the mail from, like Camilla, Georgia. And that was one of the most interesting things after the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. A lot of national groups were trying to do a lot of organizing in, which is Glenn County, which is Brunswick, Georgia. And we had to like sit down with a lot of national organizations and say, you're not reaching the people who are impacted the most from the Ahmaud Arbery case. Like Brunswick, if you step outside of Brunswick, they, like I said before, they don't have access to internet. And so the way that you're trying to engage with them, they don't see it. So a lot of people in Brunswick did not see until they would see it on the news or on TV or on the radio, how much of a focus, Ahmaud's life and his tragic murder was getting. And then one point I really want to touch upon is like the voter education piece. After 2018, when we sat down and we thought about what was coming in 2020, we knew that what Brian Kemp did in Georgia was going to become a national effort by the Trump campaign because it was so successful. And so what Trump did almost immediately, he sent Mike Pence staff down to basically learn how Kemp, manipulated through voter suppression to win an election. And so that was one of the reasons why we started Fair Fight 2020, is because we knew that that they were going to go into many states and try to steal the election. But then we would also see Donald Trump do everything that he can to, harm the process. And so when COVID hit, we automatically knew that vote by mail was going to be the thing that he comes for. So now, like I said, what's on everyone's mind right now is the USPS. And one thing that we did in 2018 with the Stacey campaign is we ran a vote by mail campaign. That's actually how she won. and I will say that we won, is because we did a massive vote by mail campaign specifically in rural areas, specifically in Southwest Georgia. But to Jamal's point, it took a lot of investment in voter education. And so right now, like I am literally putting a massive budget together that had already been planned for, is to do a massive voter education piece, because the follow-up and the chase is just so critical in vote by mail, but it's possible. And so, I want to take the opportunity to address that. So I know it wasn't a part of the question, but I know it's on everyone's mind, is we have to do voter education, no matter if you are in voting rights work or not. And so that's literally a part of my job, is I work with, I like to say, non-voting rights groups to partner with them and collaborate with them on how to do this massive voter education piece, because that's what's gonna have to win. That's what's gonna take to win an election, is the voter education piece and the voter protection piece.
Wow. Thank you, Hillary. That was amazing. Loved that answer. And yeah, just like bringing it back to the rural stuff for a second. I'm a huge advocate for rural training everywhere. I think I work primarily with candidates in the South, but there are rural areas in the Midwest, on the West Coast, even in the Northeast. So don't count us out. We need education as well. Okay, so this next question goes to everybody, but what is one thing that has surprised you the most this year with regard to your digital organizing strategy? We've all kind of touched upon it, but I'm just curious if there are any other key takeaways that you've seen.
I would say one of the takeaways that we had to obviously convert all of our fundraising events to digital fundraising events. And we realized if we kept our ticket prices the same, that we actually weren't like reaching the capacity that we could. So we had the idea we lowered our ticket price significantly. I think at one point, the first fundraiser we did is we lowered it to 25. And within 24 hours, we had 1,000 people signed up for a fundraiser. And we were just like, whoa. And so we realized that making digital fundraisers more accessible to small donors actually we took in a lot of money. And so that's one of the tactics that we've changed. But another thing that I've been doing is, like, I know we're talking digital here, but we also have done fundraisers with conference calls for those in rural areas. I'll put Stacy on like a Maestro conference call with folks in Southwest Georgia, because I know that they're not able to log on to a Zoom account, but they can call in and be on a Maestro call and everything. So that was what I would say for digital fundraisers. Lowering the ticket price was something that our fundraising manager, Dom, thought of, and it was extremely successful, and we've been doing that since.
I would say the DNC was in a unique position in 2019 because we knew we were going to work with the presidential nominee, but obviously we didn't know who the presidential nominee was going to be. And unlike in years past, there wasn't like a one-on-one primary, right? Like there were many primaries, many of which just ran outstanding digital programs, but a lot of them were built from scratch, and things were splintered such that I really looked at our role in 2019 as list building for whoever the nominee was going to be. And also just like there were many different types of candidates that could have like been the nominee, and like we would have had to we had to have a one size fits all approach to, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is like, it's hard to do, right? But the thing we basically figured out, and like through conversations with all those campaigns, is no one would object to a larger email and SMS and voter contact list. And one of the virtues of the DNC, just by existing in the permanent capacity, is we do have tens of millions of people in our email file. Most of them are people who got involved in 2008 or 2012 or 2016, and then they pretty much only get involved in presidential years. So a really big technical challenge for us is to try to identify who are those people that are tuning in for 2020, and basically like, how can we identify those people on our end without spending, $50 million on Facebook ads to essentially do the same thing. And I think we've been really pretty successful in doing that. And the idea for us has been like, how do we reactivate them so that they can engage in small dollar donor activity? The thing that has surprised us again is how many of those people actually want to take meaningful organizing action? How many of those people want to like text? How many of those people want to like hop in a Facebook group with their friends and family? How many people want to like just essentially just take some meaningful action to defeat Donald Trump beyond making a $25 donation? And also just to keep harping on Jamal's point, is it's really good we're raising a lot of money right now, because we are going to have to use our email and our SMS list to do voter education over the next 2 months. That's going to come at an opportunity cost for fundraising, right? And when you can't send the fundraising emails to your list all day, every day, like that costs money to not do for us, especially when we're raising money at the volume that we're raising now. So basically being able to build the structure up earlier like allows us to do more voter education, again, to that like core audience of Democrats that is definitely going to vote for Democrats, but just needs a nudge on how to do that.
You want me to go next? All right. I think two things that kind of stood out to us is, one, in the COVID environment, we were surprised to be in direct competition with everybody on the internet, which is basically, cognitively know it. But when everything shut down in the pandemic and nothing was happening in the real world, like talking about, and everybody was in competition for the eyeballs on the internet, you know, in a normal election year, we might be in competition with like, you know, other organizations for our data segments, but now you're in direct competition with Ford and their advertising buy and anybody doing addressable TV, Hulu, and all these other people who are doing acquisition. And then all these people are doing these online concerts and promotions and stuff like that. So you couldn't even get the novelty of doing this online and trying to find your way to have your event being the one that's going to be this intake funnel for your registration or volunteer, your donation piece is now in direct competition with like Tom Hanks is doing something or iHeartRadio is doing something. And whether or not that went well, if you do something similar to that, they're going to be like, okay, I don't want to do that because I saw this other one and it looked like crap. So now you have to find different ways to engage people in for an intake funnel digitally that is different from everybody else's. And once we got that figured out, then we had this second issue we had to figure out. Is basically that even if you're doing a full digital program, whether it's mail or it's voter registration or something like that, donations were fine. But on the other two, there's an analog step that happens. There's a real life step at the end where they're going to have to print out the form. They're going to have to mail the form. And we realized very quickly that the main reason why these people, we had this high number of incompletes for our programs that people started but it ended, is because the libraries were closed, the schools were closed. They were not at their work. So having an access to a printer became this massive gap. And it led to us not being able to close on people who had the willingness to actually register online or even request an absentee ballot online. And these are things that we had to find, and we're currently trying to find ways to mitigate that. Ballot Ready has a fund for printing out the forms, which is really great. We're probably using their tool to kind of help close that gap. And then we're having lawyers look at, can we even give like FedEx Kinko's credits and all these other pieces? And we're also going to be doing some things with other partners online to kind of bridge that analog gap to say like that people have the willingness to engage initially on digital. We have to find a way to close that last gap on to actually convert them to actually casting a ballot in the easiest and most effective and efficient way possible.
Yeah, so at Mobilize, we're not really directly involved in any specific. So I feel like from our vantage point, we get to see what folks are doing. And I would say, I mean, I've mentioned that folks are involving that dollar ask in a lot of their events, but what we saw really as the pivot in a lot of folks' digital strategy, I mean, there are a lot of organizations that have never even worked remotely. So there was a lot of challenges for folks to even like internally pivot, let alone change all of the plans that they had previously made. But aside from all the fun, creative things that we see folks doing, overarchingly, training is what folks are doing, and that is what we have seen, whether it is Zoom, whether it is calls, a lot of education-based sort of panels and training seem to dominate all summer, and I feel like that's pivoting now into more action-oriented, but I think all of the work that was done training all of these volunteers and supporters leading up to this point, I think is going to hopefully fuel a lot of the work that you all are doing to make sure that you have the folks that can do the training on the ground. But that is the biggest adaptation I think I've seen as folks move into this pandemic life, and really this is the new reality. So a lot of stuff is virtual, and trying to equip supporters with the ability and the skills that I think that has been a lot more of a focus overall than a lot of other years in the past.
Awesome. Thanks, Jocelyn. We just have one question in the chat and we'll move on to our last question. But Liz from Oxfam asked, given all the attacks on mail-in ballots, should we create a website where folks can easily find out where they can drop off their ballots? Maybe this already exists. Any thoughts on that?
So the DNC manages a website, really a web platform, I suppose, called iwillvote.com, working with the Biden campaign to continue to build it out. Historically, we've run this for the past 4 cycles. We really focus I Will Vote on polling place lookup. That's like the key thing that we make it do, because polling place location lookup data is actually just so variable and messy that having just one repository that like really focuses on real-time information and getting that from the state parties who, know their communities best. That's really what it focuses on. This year, it can't clearly just focus on polling place locations. So we're building in actually specifically, we talked about building in this feature this morning. So that is a thing we expect I will vote to be able to support.
Awesome, thanks. Last question here for all of you. Thinking about 2020 as the beginning of a new era for grassroots organizing, what are the most important changes we must make to face the future of organizing effectively?
I'll start. So this is really a unique moment in recent history. There is so much energy right now, and so many people we see volunteering for the very first time ever. The big challenge we see is that how do we keep that momentum going past 2020? Because we are going into a year that is going to be really important with redistricting and all sorts of battles at the state level in state legislatures. So there's a huge focus for us, really making sure we're optimizing digital tools to increase civic engagement, advocacy work at the local level, and making sure that it's really equitable and accessible to everyone. So it's definitely a focus that we feel is very important. And how to make that sort of connection so that every micro community that is formed right now in the work that we're doing, there's a way in 2021 and beyond for people to continue building that momentum. And for Mobilize, that really includes building features that foster and sustain these communities. We're building out online actions and petitions, group chat, so making sure that there are ways to kind of continue building that community in a virtual space, as well as building out our volunteer hosting features, just to name a few, but really overarchingly embracing the grassroots and building a deep trust in those communities and micro communities. Sort of like it's your collective movement, and the more comfort there is in trusting and lifting up people in your community, the more powerful the movement will be. And we see, honestly, in the data that organizations that embrace volunteer hosting and are able to expand their reach, expand it to many more zip codes across the United States. And we also see that these small volunteer-led events actually bring a higher percentage of new supporters than similar organizer-run events. We also see that the folks that actually come to a volunteer-led event are more likely to keep coming back and keep taking action with that movement. And so just really focusing in on making sure that what we're building now continues to fuel and build that momentum as we really do come in. This is the most important election of our lifetime, but next year might be the most important legislative battles that we've fought thus far.
And I agree. Staying engaged after 2020 ends is the key. And it's really making sure that we're in every single community, not just the metro areas that we see as safe havens for progressives, because it's a myth. So not packing up and leaving when the election over, it's actually doubling down and staying connected. That's how we win.
I think one of the most exciting things that has happened over the past few years is just how smart and sophisticated small dollar grassroots donors have gotten. Just the fact that people are engaging at the level they do with even Senate campaigns is truly remarkable. And my take on this is, I think there are frankly a lot of organizations in our space that still treat grassroots supporters like they're not that smart and not that sophisticated, and I don't think they'll be rewarded for that long term.
We're really excited about all the new energy and people who are in this now, who are now raised their political antenna over the course of the last month, especially ones who are African Americans. And now we're bridging the gap between, to kind of close the gap on the apathy so that we can get rid of the apathy. And so they're seeing this as a way of engagement. It requires a conversation not only with those people who are newly activated, but also with the funders so that they're not engaging them incorrectly, and all of our partner actors, because some of them actually want to go with clipboards with a person with literally a brick in their hand and say, hey, I see you have a brick in your hand. Would you like to register to vote? I'm like, no, you have to have a serious other conversation before we can get there, but I like where your head's at. So this is how we're going to go ahead and get this person up to this ladder progression where they can go from this person who is willing to risk life and limb to protest to becoming a registered voter, then an activist, and then learn how to be more sophisticated in their engagement of government, because that's where their real frustration is, and then turn them into an activist and even a leader and maybe even a elected official themselves, because they care a lot about their community and the passion and the injustice. And I think that is not something that's a bad thing. It just needs to be directed correctly. And that's those riots, the anger, that's just the passion in their desire for change, overcoming their sophistication and knowing how to actually make that change. And we just need to find a way to bridge that and point that in the right direction and not admonish that, at least the ones who are good actors, because some of them actually just want to just burn shit.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Key takeaways from this is education, make it accessible and keep it sustained. Thank you so much for all tuning in. On behalf of all my coworkers at Act Blue, after a year of organizing, a majority of Act Blue employees have actually formed a union with Campaign Workers Guild, and we're pretty excited about that. By forming this union, we want to build on the progress we've already made and create an even safer, more equitable, more inclusive workspace. And we hope you all stick around to see what we do next. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.